Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's February 3rd. It is the February 3rd, 2022. It's the February meeting of the school directors of the Council Rock School Board. I would ask you all, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Secretary, can I have a roll call, please?
Edward Tate.
Present.
Michael Thorward.
Here.
Marion McKee.
Here.
Joseph Hidalgo.
Here.
Ed Solomon.
Here.
Mike Roosevelt.
Here.
Bob Hickey.
Here.
Rhoda Pally.
Here.
And Krista Marcel.
Here.
Thank you, ma'am. From here, we're going to go to the Council Rock South Student Advisory Board. Mr. Funk is going to provide entertainment since none has been scheduled. Sir, you're on. Good evening to you.
Really don't want to hear.
Did you want to see him sing, right?
No, that would be bad. That would
Good evening, Mr. Funk.
Good to see you, Mr. Salomon. Good to see the Board of Directors, Central Administrators. Thank you very much. It is indeed a pleasure to come before you this evening to introduce Council Rock High School South's Student Advisory Board, Katie, Mallory, Isabella, Stephen, and Eric. The students will be updating you and the community on the many happenings and events at Council Rock High School South. I want to thank them in advance for their time and effort, and most especially, I want to thank them for being outstanding representatives of the high school. Are we good? Who's going first? Take it away, Katie. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie Burke, and I'm the 12th grade representative for South Student Advisory Board. Tonight, I'll be talking about the Mini-thon and musical happenings at South. Last Wednesday, the combined band, lab band, and jazz band performed in South's auditorium during an evening concert for family and friends. This was the first of many performances to come. The lab and jazz bands will attend competitions throughout the next few months and continue to perfect their musical skills. South's choir is busy preparing for their long-awaited trip to Italy in April. They are so excited to witness and experience the language and culture while showcasing their talents in Rome, Amalfi, Pompeii, and Sorrento. The production of Golden Wings' student-run musical called Seussical is also underway. After 2:15 every day, the auditorium is filled with students singing, acting, dancing, and even the orchestra is busy practicing in the pit. You can see Seussical on March 3rd and 4th at 7 p.m., and March 5th at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. in the auditorium. South's Mini-thon Club is holding their annual Mini-thon dance on February 25th from 5 to 9 p.m. in the gym. This is South's replica of Penn State University's thon, which raises money for pediatric cancer research. And of course, I can't forget to mention that our countdown to the senior trip is now under 100 days. There are just 74 days left until we're in Orlando. Our last payment was due yesterday. Thank you all for listening and have a great night.
Good evening, School Board. I am Mallory Marsan, the 11th grade representative. The National School Counselors Week begins next week on February 7th and lasts until the 11th. We can use that time to celebrate the unique and sometimes underappreciated efforts of our school counselors. The American School Counseling Association says that the week highlights the tremendous impact school counselors can have in helping students achieve school success and plan for a career. Don't forget to thank a counselor for all that they do if you see them. Speaking of counselors, the time has come to plan an appropriate program of studies for next year. During course selection, students will identify several elective courses along with their core courses when meeting with their counselor. Counselors will be meeting individually with each student from January 31st until March 4th. Course selection sheets will be sent home for a signature. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Isabella Thomas, the 10th grade representative, and I will be informing you tonight about the upcoming events in our 2022 school year. Recently, on January 31st, 2022, was the start of our second semester of school. Report cards for the second marking period will be open on HAC on February 10th at 3 p.m. There is also a PLC late arrival day on February 14th, 2022. A friendly reminder that bus transportation runs as normal that day, However, the bell for first period is at 8:18 a.m., so students with their own transportation should arrive accordingly. On February 18th, all schools will be closed for professional development, and on February 21st, all schools and offices will be closed for President's Day. From the Student Services Office, for your general planning purposes, the Spring Keystone Test Administration will occur at Council Rock South on May 16th, 18th, 19th, and 20th, following a special test schedule. More information will be sent out as we get closer to the testing window. Results of the Spring 2021 Keystone Test Administration will be mailed home this week. Thank you for listening and have a great night.
Good evening, everyone. I am Stephen Belder, and tonight I will be informing you about South's winter athletic season, as well as some preliminary information about the upcoming spring season. The Council Rock South wrestling team continued their success this year. They won the Suburban 1 League Patriot Division for the 10th straight year and 17 out of the 20 last seasons. At the league tournament, South had 5 champions, 5 second-place finishers, and 3 who placed third. In addition, the Golden Hawks placed 6th at the Central Mountain Tournament, 5th at the Christmas City Classic in Bethlehem, and 6th in the annual Escape the Rock Tournament. All of these competitions attract wrestlers from different states, and our athletes are among this elite group. Presently, our team is preparing for the PIAA district duels, state duels, and individual district, regional, and state tournaments. The Council Rock South boys and girls basketball teams are having a lot of success in the 2021-2022 season. Both teams are vying for a District 1 tournament playoff spot and look to close out the regular season on February 10th. The South boys and girls swimming teams have had a lot of success in the pool, too. The boys team is heading to their Suburban 1 League Championship on Friday, February the 11th, and the girls on Saturday the 12th. Some swimmers on both the boys and girls teams have qualified for the district championship, which will be held in York, Pennsylvania on February 25th and 26th. The bowling team and the boys and girls winter track teams have not yet finished their seasons. They have done exceptionally well and are working hard to finish their year on a high note. For the folks listening at home, tryout information for the spring season for baseball, girls and boys lacrosse, softball, boys tennis, boys and girls spring track, and boys volleyball can be found on their respective team websites under the Athletics tab on South's website. Be on the lookout for important information regarding the submission of required forms to participate in your primary school email. That's all in athletics. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Eric Spector, and I'm a senior at Council Rock High School South, and I am a level 300 student in the Multimedia Technology program at Middlebucks Institute of Technology. February is Career and Technical Education Month, and the goal is to bring public awareness and celebrate the value and achievements of CTE programs across the country. The 2022 Skills USA District 2 competitions were held at Delaware County Technical High School in January and February, with MBIT students participating in 40 competitions. Middlebucks won 11 gold medals, 12 silver, and 6 bronze. These students earning gold medals will compete at the state level in the Skills USA state competition, which will be held in Hershey, Pennsylvania in April. Congratulations to all the teachers and students who took part in the Skills USA District 2 competitions. The commercial art and advertising design students created an emblem for the Veteran Divisions program, Mentor Polo shirts. They were happy to donate our talent and technical skills for such a worthwhile cause as helping American veterans. There is now a central location for information on scholarships and financial aid on the MBIT website. Seniors can check for new scholarships and have direct access to scholarship applications. This information will be updated weekly. We look forward to reporting to you at the next school board meeting. Thank you for your time and opportunity to keep you informed about what is happening at Middlebucks Institute of Technology.
That's great, guys. Thank you. Nothing, Mr. Funk? No song out the door? No? Okay. right, go home and do your homework, guys, all right? From there, we're going to go to letter E, the substitute superintendent report. Dr. Ellie, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Solomon. Good evening, members of the board and members of the community. First of all, thank you to our South Student Advisory Board for that information that they provided about activities that are happening and opportunities for our students and for our community. I want to begin tonight by recognizing some of our young artists in the district. Recently, Anna Williamson from North and Alexis Filipov from South earned awards for three-dimensional work in the Phillips Mill Youth Art Show. Anna earned first place and Alexis earned second place. Students from 23 different high schools competed in the show, so congratulations to Anna and Alexis. Also, Churchville Elementary's Stella Opakov, her artwork will be on display in the Bucks County Intermediate Unit Student Art Gallery representing Council Rock. This gallery, if you're not familiar, is a gallery displayed at the Bucks County Intermediate Unit where there are pieces of art selected from every district in our county, and they're on display for throughout the building for those that come to the building for meetings. So it's wonderful to see the student art on display, and exciting that one of our Churchville Elementary students' piece of art was selected for that this year. On January 17th, over 200 students and staff from across the district gathered in the cafeteria at Council Rock South for our annual day of service. The students assembled 150 hygiene kits and deployment packages for our servicemen, and we do know that one of those deployment packages has made its way to a submarine at this point. Additionally, they made blankets for shelters. They boxed 9 large carts of donated items such as food and baby items for local organizations, including Wrightstown Food Cupboard, Newtown Food Cupboard, A Woman's Place, Maternal Child Consortium, and Bucks County Homeless Shelter. I wish to thank all of our volunteers who helped make our day of service a success. The second marking period ended on Friday, January 27th. Teachers are busy preparing report cards, which opened for parents in HAC or the Home Access Center on February 10th. And on Monday, January 31st, with the start of the second semester, we began offering one-way temporary viewing for eligible students who are home from school due to COVID-19 positive test or one of the 16 communicable diseases. As a reminder, to be eligible for this option, a parent must contact the school nurse. Once verified by the nurse, students will be able to view and listen to direct classroom instruction, but not participate, and they will be marked absent. And finally, for my last item, I'm going to make my way over to the podium, so give me just a second. Mr. Frederickson, can you? Oh, wait. Never mind, I think I got it. There we go. Thank you. I apologize. Finally, this evening, I want to share with the board and the community as well information about our Council Rock proposed Portrait of a Graduate. At our Education Committee meeting on January 27th, members of the Portrait of the Graduate design team presented the proposed Council Rock Portrait of a Graduate to the board. The Portrait of a Graduate articulates our community's collective vision and aspirations for our graduates. As a part of our strategic plan, the Portrait of a Graduate helps define student success in a continuously evolving world. A design team representative of students, staff, parents, business people, community organizations, and higher education met to review research on the skills and competencies employers demand in their employees. This included reviewing information from the World Economic Forum's 2020 Jobs Report and information from the Forbes Human Resource Council. After reviewing this research, the team reached consensus on skills and competencies Council Rock graduates will need to be successful in our evolving and changing complex world. In the portrait you see on the screen, and I will scroll up a little bit, the competencies the design team identified are organized into 5 broad themes of learn, lead, engage, thrive, and inspire. They developed sentences which describe each of the competencies within each theme to help articulate what the competency is and how a graduate might use it. For example, as you see here in the first theme of learn, a graduate will leverage academic knowledge to think critically, using problem solving, reasoning, evaluation, and analysis to support their work and the work of others. As another example, in the broad theme of lead, a graduate will collaborate to solve challenges, to actively listen and work together to generate ideas and solutions. And finally, in the theme of thrive, a graduate will exercise flexibility and agility in response to changing events and new understandings. We received feedback from stakeholders via a survey in December and January. And the design team reviewed that feedback and made some revisions to the portrait, which you see here tonight, including the decision to engage high school students in designing a logo or a graphic representing our proposed portrait. We'd like to gather a little bit more feedback from members of our Council Rock community and invite folks to visit the teaching and learning page of our website to review the portrait in its entirety and provide feedback via the survey link found on that page. So at the very top of this page, where it explains the portrait of a graduate, you'll see here, there is a link right here that will take you to a feedback form where you can provide feedback. The community members will have an opportunity to provide feedback through Thursday, February 17th. And Mr. Solomon, that ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elliott. Good evening. Mr. Cox, Solicitor report, please.
Mr. Salomon, the board held an executive session on the 21st of January on personnel. It will hold an executive session tomorrow also on personnel, and that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. From here, we're going to go to public comment. It's my understanding that there's only one person signed up that may have left, but for full transparency, Jack Morgan, are you in the audience? No. Sir, do you in the audience, do you wish to speak? Okay, thank you. So from there, we're going to move on. No one. Dr. Thorwart, would you mind taking H&I, please? Approval of the minutes.
Sure. I move to approve the minutes of the meeting of the Board of School Directors held on January 6, 2022, and I further move to approve the minutes of the special meeting of the board on January 13th, 2022.
Second.
Oh, second, Mrs. Marcel. Any objections? Any comments from the board? Hearing none, I'm going to ask the secretary to mark that unanimous. From there, we're going to go to Education Committee. Good evening, Mrs. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Salmon. The Education Committee met on January 27th, and as Dr. Elliott just explained, we had discussion of the portrait of a graduate. We will continue our discussion of portrait of a graduate at our February Education Committee meeting. In addition, the Chapter 339 guidelines were presented by Dr. Black. They are on our agenda tonight. Dr. Sanko presented the calendar for the year 2023-2024. In addition, he presented and we discussed the Council Rock South Senior Prom at the West in Princeton. That agreement is on tonight's Finance Committee agenda. And finally, as part of that committee, Dr. Elliott presented information on one-way viewing, which I believe has already taken place in our district, so thank you for that. That concludes my report of our committee meeting. I now move to approve consent agenda items B through F as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second, Dr. Thorwart. Any objections? Any comments from the board? All right, hearing none, I'm going to ask the secretary. I apologize, Mr. Thorwart, please. Mr. Roosevelt. Sorry, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I think this, just on the calendar, this is not I think that there are a lot of people in the community that want spring break. There's a lot of people in the community that want to start the school at a certain time. There's a lot of people in the community that want to end on a certain time. So I would just ask that this is a great opportunity. I'm getting feedback. A great opportunity to come to the board and let us know how we can shape a calendar that fits. This one is great. I know this is as a result of the school and the hard work that the administration has done. So that's the only comment for future years. Let's, see what we need to do if you want spring break in or out.
Okay. Anybody else? The calendar's not listed on the agenda.
No, there's no action on that calendar tonight.
Okay. Just to clarify, Mr. Roosevelt, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Any objections? Or hearing none, I want to ask the secretary to mark that with unanimous consent too. Letter G, Bucks County IU, Miss Pally, good evening. Update, please.
Yeah, hi. I attended the board meeting on January 18th, and I was also assigned and attended their personnel committee and their finance committee meetings that took place before the board meeting. And at that meeting, the new board members were appointed, so I'm now officially there. But I think there is also a ballot that you have to vote on in order to make it official for them. So there were presentations about various programs, services, and budgets. I don't think I need to report about anyone specifically. There was a discussion of the programs and services for the budget for 22-23, and I think that will come. I don't know if he came already to the Business Administration Office, but the good news this is about the 13 districts that they provide revenue to the unit, but this budget is only like $2.2 million for all of them, and out of like $190-something million budget for the unit. So the good news is that our contribution as Council Rock not only is the same for next year, but it is like $251 less. I mean, that's the projected. So, but we do, and I can give you more information how this number is calculated. It's $138,923. It's a fixed cost, and then there is a cost per student. But the intermediate unit, they try to find revenue from their entrepreneurial activities, so they keep the costs as constant as possible to the 13 districts. So again, we need to vote on that before May 1st, and I'm sure that Jason will bring that to our attention.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Go to, from there, Middle Bucks Institute. Is that Mr. Hickey or Mrs. Marceau? Oh, Mr. Hickey, good evening.
Good evening, everybody. We had our first meeting on January 10th. Basically, it was a reorganization meeting. I'm not sure if you're aware or not how they work at Middle Bucks as opposed to the board presidents and vice presidents being voted on. It's done on a rotating basis between the sending schools. Eric from our student advisory board, he mentioned all the details about how well we did at the skills competition over the last couple months and what's going on there. One of the biggest things that the board is considering, and it has already been budgeted for that, is an expansion of the welding lab for a variety of reasons. One is for safety, and another one is going to add a few more welding stations to the lab. But like I said, the funds have already been set aside. They're just trying to work out final details. In addition to that, evening classes have begun this week. Everything seems to be going well. One thing that I didn't know, Bucks County is the technical, it's really expanding. They said over the last 3 years, I think enrollment is up 17% from before, so a lot more people are considering going into that avenue. Later this month, we're supposed to be hearing about a proposed budget, and that will be on the 14th, which is Valentine's Day, so hopefully it'll be a short meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Key, and I'll add that Mrs. Marcel was named vice chair of the MBIT as well. Congratulations, Mrs. Marcel. From there, we'll move to letter I. Mr. Tate Kreff, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. I've got a brief report. It's courtesy of Co-President Marianne Malicious, who's a teacher at Goodnoe Elementary. She's co-president of the Council Rock Education Foundation this year. This is an update on the Achieve Greenhouse grant project at the Star Building from Daniel Bartleson. The Achieve Greenhouse is in full swing with assistance from the school district's facility team. They were able to add drainage, power, water, and a permanent cement slab for the greenhouse. Students have begun the process of planting new seeds and maintaining houseplants that would otherwise struggle in the winter. The Achieve students and staff are looking forward to growing vegetables and hanging basket plants, possibly in late winter. You can learn more about the Foundation's activities at creducationfoundation.org, and Ms. Malicious will be coming to our next meeting on March the 3rd with our new executive director of the foundation, and we'll get a presentation from them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful. Policy Committee, Dr. Thorwart, please.
Sure. This policy was discussed at the facilities meeting. It's policy 707. It was minor in terms of what we did, so we moved it to the consent agenda tonight. With that, I move to approve the modification to policy 707, use of school facilities as contained in this agenda.
Second.
Second, Mrs. Marcel. Any objections? Any comment from the board? Hearing none, I'm going to ask the secretary to mark that unanimous as well. From there, we're going to move into the Finance Committee. Good evening, Mr. Hidalgo.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. The Finance Committee met on January 13th. It was a pretty full agenda there. The Cornerstone financial advising firm gave us an update on banking and investment holdings. We also had a credit rating reaffirmed that was explained to AA. We kept that, and this environment is a good sign of our financial strength. We had the auditors that came in and do our annual audit, do a presentation. There was a good discussion about our transportation contracts that we're in the process of awarding. It was at that time going to be brought up today, but we're still working on the details of that, and maybe we'll have a little update in a little bit about that. We had a really good discussion about substitute teacher pay, which looks like that was passed at the special meeting right after the Finance Committee meeting on January 13th. Technology purchase request from Mr. Matt Fredrickson's over there. I don't know if that's made on tonight's agenda or not, but that's being discussed. It is. And then we talked about food service purchases and a policy update to our student accident policy 211, which to make it align with the policy to align more with the contract language that we have now. So I'm going to leave it there. And should I go for a consent agenda vote and then ask Mr. Harris to speak if he wants?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, so I move to approve consent agenda items B through H as contained in the attached agenda attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Second, Mrs. Marcel.
Mr. Harris, do you have anything we'd like to add to the consent agenda? If not, that's okay. No, sir, not at this time. Okay.
Okay. Any further comments from the board regarding B through H? Nope. Hearing none, I'm going to ask the secretary to mark that unanimous. Letter I. Continue, Mr. Hidalgo.
So moving on to I move to approve the agreement between Council Rock School District and Sarah Car Care Incorporated for transportation services.
Second.
Second is Dr. Thorwart. Mr. Harris.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. No, there's no presentation. I just wanted to speak briefly about the construct of the contract. This is a temporary contract to get us through the end of the school year, which will allow us to assign certain routes of transportation that are consistently challenged by the labor shortage that we have with First Student. And although it is slightly more expensive, it is going to better allow us to control how those routes get covered. And there are certain routes that are consistently left uncovered because of emergent callouts. The night before is easier to cover than the morning of, and we've had a lot of callouts for the morning of. And when we have a call out of the morning of, and you'll find out more about this at the finance meeting, it's like a Tetris puzzle. And we have to have certain pieces of routes covered, and there's always something that is invariably uncovered, which makes a consistent number of folks very unhappy. And we recognize it, and this is the administration's attempt to ameliorate that problem and to hopefully have some first student individuals who are on leave. They're coming back before the end of March, and hopefully with Sarah Car Care in the mix to assign those routes, we can alleviate some of the pain and consternation of our community members.
I think it's fair to open it up to questions from the board to Mr. Harris, if you would, sir. Board members with questions. Mr. Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Mr. Harris, I guess I'm just making a comment that anybody in the community who's concerned, and I know a lot of people are, about the bus service, there was extensive discussion, wasn't there, at the last Finance Committee meeting about a whole lot of activities and efforts that are being made to address the issues with bus transportation. So while we are not having an extended conversation about it here tonight, we did at the last Finance Committee meeting, and there's a lot going on, isn't there?
There is, and we've met severally with each vendor who has provided a bid for us. We are concurrently working out contract language so that the board has a menu of options to consider. So just so the board is aware, I will be providing an update with a narrated PowerPoint. So you'll hear my voice for radio so that you can take a look at some of the options that we're experiencing, as well as update you on some of the activities from today. We did meet with one of the vendors who has made a bid, and they've made an overture to perhaps take on some more of the work that we thought that they were not able to do. And additionally, we are looking to modify some of the terms of the contracts that we are currently considering. So there's a huge update from when we last met. January 13th feels like a forever ago. And so there is a lot that's happened since then. So I'm excited to get that to you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I know I have some, but I default to my colleagues. Mr. Roosevelt, sir.
This is fantastic news, and I'm hoping that there are lots of parents across the district that are watching us on YouTube. This has been a hot button issue. This has been something that the board has been working with for quite some time and that the administration has been working with longer. So I thank you for working hard and pulling this together, especially as this is expected to cause relief. The one question that I have is to ensure that Sarah Car Care has their vehicles appropriately lettered and labeled so that parents don't have concern of some random vehicle coming to pick their child up.
Oh, absolutely. That was a question that was circulated through the board, and they will be appropriately labeled. And our offices will contact the parents whose routes are being changed, and you'll have the name of the driver, the approximate time for pickup, and color of the vehicle, type of vehicle, et cetera. Not just a random U-Boat.
Yeah, Mr. Harris, my clarification to Mr. Roosevelt's question is, I think it's a good opportunity right now. This is not a bus service.
It is not.
It could be a glorified Uber, if you would, but it's going to solve some of our problems. So that's got to be clear to our parents. It could be a minivan, it could be a sedan. I mean, you can list the items that may be showing up at a parent's home, that it will not be a traditional yellow bus. Could you just expand on that?
It will not be a traditional yellow bus. It may be a larger 12 to 14 passenger van with a large catchment for school students on it. It could be a minivan. It could be a 9-passenger van similar to what we use for our Chief Center, as well as a regular town car.
And they would be available to us throughout the day to fix stopgap issues where we can with the fleet that they
As
have
best
to
we
offer.
can, yes.
Right, okay. Anybody else from the board? Mrs. Marcel.
Mr. Harris, I just wanted to thank you and also Mr. Adams for spending a lot of time on this. I know it's been really difficult for the parents, as Mr. Roosevelt said. It's been difficult. We've been getting a lot of emails. We continue to, but I just wanted to commend both you and Mr. Adams for sticking through this and just being creative and trying to help us. So just thank you for that.
You're welcome. Just for the board edification, once the board considers this and gives us the go-ahead, it would be approximately 2.5 weeks to onboard. So we will still continue to experience some challenges as we have emergent call-outs, but we're hoping to have relief very soon.
So are you and Matt, do you have it's not a loaded question, but do you have a plan for this service? Like, is there a percentage of our community that this would fit better than, I can't imagine my daughter's school bus with 48 kids.
Absolutely.
Coming with 18 cars on my street, you know? So, although the kids probably love it. I mean, can you elaborate, or is it too soon?
No, quite simply, the challenge that we have with the first student scheduling is that we prioritize our IEP-driven special education transportation. And when we have a call out there, or we have a need to cover that as a priority, those sometimes take up a larger vehicle than necessary. So we're looking to have some of those one-off, two-off students who need a wheelchair access or a specific location, instead of lumping all those students in one vehicle, and then the students who are going to a Council Rock school are now late. We can then diversify and have that single car take that single child to that single location.
So is it fair to say they'll be activated as we need them? So almost like an Uber service. Hey, I need a, if it's 15-passenger van.
With reasonable notice, yes, as best we can.
Yeah. Mr. Hickey, I'm sorry for taking your time.
As opposed to planning, you mentioned planning. I mean, as you said, the board gets numerous emails, and I know you do as well, and Mr. Adams. I'll just use an example that I get, Bus 52. There must be certain buses or certain routes that seem to be affected more so than others. Does this plan include alleviating their concerns, or at least alleviating their problems, so that they don't have their kids just sitting out there at 7:30 in the morning, freezing, waiting for a bus, or finding out at 6:30 that there is no bus?
So to answer your question completely, I'd have to defer to Mr. Adams about Bus 52 in particular, but what I do know about the construct of this problem is that the most difficult routes to cover are those pieces of work that service the middle school. Because if a route does not have an elementary run, then they usually pick up an elementary run if there's coverage needed. If it doesn't have a high school run, they will pick that up. But the times at which our students are to arrive based on their route schedule, the middle school is the most difficult. So that's why you keep hearing Bus 34, Bus 52, those middle school routes. And for everyone listening, it frustrates me when I open it up at 6:15 in the morning and I see a completely different set of schedules where we had four coverages the night before, now we need 10. And that's due to an emergent call out or what have you. We're working with First Student on that issue. And right now, they don't have the same substitute pool that they've had in the past prior to the pandemic. So they're looking to onboard more drivers, and they're also looking to we are looking to strategically deploy Sarah Car Care so that we can alleviate some of those smaller routes to hopefully pick up some of those. Because if you have a larger vehicle that's available, but you don't have a driver to drive it, now you may have a driver available to take care of that route.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the board? Ms. Pally, please.
So the Sarah Car Company will alleviate some of these problems, but definitely not the majority, right? Because I know you're working on bids with like a couple of other companies. So, and since we have received so many messages from parents who had enough with this, I think like one more day is too much for them. Can we accelerate the process so we can provide the solution sooner than later?
To answer your question, we have a current bid that would start for July 1 with whatever vendor the board should select, or number of vendors. Currently, we're working with First Student in regard to their call-outs, as well as their drivers on leave of absence. And we've been informed as late as a meeting, I believe it was on the 27th of January, that we have 6 or 7 who are currently on leave that should be back before the end of March. So as those drivers become available, they will be available to fill in those routes. That is our primary concern, to make sure that this first student has a full cadre of drivers. And if they're on leave, similar to what we experienced with the substitute teacher shortage, we can put students in another classroom or in an auditorium once they're here, but our challenge is we can't even get them picked up. So we're certainly not admiring the problem, and I want to be clear to the community and to this board that from day one, it has been the bane of my existence to see that there is a call-out list with routes being missed. And it's been the action of Mr. Adams and his team and Mr. Cox and Dr. Elliott to make sure that we have the best chance of success to meet with all of our constituents, and that means the vendor, to clearly communicate our intentions. And it's my hope that you'll have something that's actionable by the finance meeting, so that you could perhaps even consider it at the special meeting or the next board meeting on the 3rd of March.
Anybody else? Mr. Dago? Good.
Just wondering, do they have like a first view service, so that might help to?
I don't know, but I can certainly find out.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? And Mr. Harris, of course, thank you from me personally. You know, I will bring this up till I'm blue in the face. Kids need to go to school. We need to teach them, and we need to take them home. So that's marching orders. Yeah, we're going to get this done, but these parents are at wit's end with this, and rightfully so. So is there any other further discussion from the board? Is there any objections to this? Right. Hearing none, I want to ask the secretary to mark this unanimous consent. We'll move to J and K personnel actions. Mrs. Marcel, would you mind?
I move to approve the personnel actions and the personnel actions addendum as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Thorwart. Any comment from the board? Any objections? All right. Mr. Harris.
Adams did just text me. He says, yes, we are targeting the routes that are consistently missed to be the ones helped by Sarah Car Care, including Bus 52 and other middle school timeframes.
Yeah.
In the horse's mouth.
There you go. Technology at work. There you go. Any comment on this personnel actions? Any objections? All right, hearing none, I ask the secretary to mark that unanimous consent. From there, we're going to move to facilities. I assume Mr. Roosevelt's going to take it.
Yes, thanks very
evening
much.
again.
The Facilities Committee met on January 20th. We had several items to discuss. We had a presentation from our custodial contractor. We had a discussion regarding some contracts of our use of our turf field and the use of our facilities. And we had an update from Mr. Taylor regarding the construction process and progress of some of our construction buildings and our renovation buildings. The meeting went well, and with that, should I move to the next item? Agenda item B, Facilities Committee. I move to approve the individual license agreements between Council Rock United Soccer Association, Patriot FC, and the Council Rock School District from 01 July 22 through 30 June 23, subject to audit and solicitor's review.
Second.
Second, Mr. T, thank you. Any comment from the board? Doug, you want to make a comment? Not to put you on the spot, it's fine if you.
That's okay, just two quick comments. I had this as a motion item because there were two things that were asked at the meeting. One, if the termination clause could be considered to be modified in any way, and we changed it from 60 days to 90 days. So the termination clause remains as it was in the document. The only change is it's a 90-day clause versus 60. So it still gives us that right. And the ability to negotiate additional years beyond the 1 year. Language was put in there relative to that. It's non-binding, so it gives us the ability to have early discussions after March, which is fair to both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else from the board? Mr. Tate, please.
Just
Yes.
sound like a broken record here, but a lot of work went into these agreements. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Thank you to our athletic directors. Board members were involved in the conversation, and I got to give a shout out to Andy Block, who managed the relationship very effectively. And this is a great thing to have 2 turf fields for 2 soccer associations and long-term agreements, and it'll generate revenue and give a lot of opportunity for our kids to play soccer on great new fields. 2 new fields, as a matter of fact, both of them being new. So this is a win-win-win, as they say. Thank you.
Yeah, and I echo that, Mr. Tate. It's Doug, great work. Nothing like seeing kids on our fields, and being able to be a part of not only getting the fields out there, getting them renovated, getting them fit right for the kids, seeing them play is exactly what we were all hoping for. I thought I saw a hand. Mrs. Pally, please.
I do want to ask a question and talk a little bit about the ABM contract. If you, the ABM presentation, I would say. And if you think it's not appropriate now, I can wait until.
You want to wait till we get further down? Yeah, let's go. Let's do that in new business or old business. Absolutely. Anybody else? Any objections to this? All right, hearing none, I'm going to ask the secretary to mark that unanimous as well. From there, we're going to move down to items for discussion for potential revision. Letter A, Health and Safety Plan. Dr. Thorwood, I'll go right back to you with this, as you did a heck of a job last time, sir.
Thank you. However, I didn't cause this one to be on the agenda. There were some questions from the board. I'm happy to referee. But I'm looking to my left. Mr. Hidalgo pushed this one. So, Joe, please start.
Well, I guess it came to light shortly after the last meeting that one of the sections was missed in our efforts to amend the health and safety plan. So I had it right here. Basically, we were quarantining exposures, asymptomatic students that were exposed at home and requiring masks. But if you are a case, after 5 days, you were coming back to school without mask optional, strongly recommended type of situation. So that was kind of missed. And I was talking with Dr. Lambert to try to get this fixed in a sense to make it align with the wishes of the board, because they have to follow the health and safety plan. There just seems to be a quagmire left over that I'd like addressed and rectified tonight if possible. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo.
Just for clarification, you're in 3E, I believe, of the plan. Is that what you're?
Yes.
Just for the audience purposes.
Section E.
And for the board as well.
Mr. Hidalgo brought it to my attention as well. Does anyone, any comments? Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, this item is something that everybody is aware of. It seems that it was unintentional, and the result was many parents sending us emails about what they felt and what I would agree is segregation. And I believe that Council Rock School District is not segregating students, shouldn't be segregating students, and that we treat everybody equally. So I'm glad that this issue is being resolved.
So, yeah, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Mrs. Pally, please.
So do we know what the health department's guidance is? Because I was under the understanding that it's there because of the guidance of the health department. Also, it is inconsistent in some ways, but the problem is not that. The problem is that we do not follow guidelines, and we only recommend students to go back to school on day 6 with a mask, not mandate, and that's the problem. If that was a mandate, that would be no inconsistency. Do you know about the health department's policy?
Two things, if I could. I just want to be clear from Mr. Roosevelt's comments that we're talking about Section E at this point, right? In terms of masks being
yes, sir,
in one situation and required in a different situation, which is separate than, I think, the segregation piece. So speaking just to the section E, there's been a history of changes in what those two requirements are. Currently, the CDC recommends 10 days of masks for a positive case, and for an exposure in the home, they would recommend 5 days of quarantine and 5 days of mask. The Bucks County Department of Health, prior to the January meeting, when we made a change, they made their if you remember back to the August 15th, that was the last we've heard from the Department of Health, and that was prior to elementary students having the option to be vaccinated. So, and we haven't heard anything from the Department of Health since. At that time, the Department of Health's recommendation was for the positive cases, the Department of Health was recommending, let me just pull that up to make sure I'm saying it exactly correctly. Department of Health's recommendation was for the positive cases, 3 days return, 7 days masks. We went to 5 days return and 5 days masks. So it was a total of 10 in both situations. But as I said, we have not heard any guidance from the Department of Health on that since.
Anyone else? Dr. Lambert, I looked at this. I have a motion in front of me. I think it makes it simple. Let me make my motion and then I'll explain it to you. And I've got it written down so the Madam Secretary can have it then. I move to strike the third bulleted point of Section E of the Health and Safety Plan and all sub-bullets. And I further move to remove the COVID dashboard from the CR website, which means striking this section from the second bulleted item of Section E.
Second.
That does two things. One, it gets rid of the dashboard.
Second was Mrs. Marcel.
And two, it strikes anything that says asymptomatic, which to me means healthy. I've got a second. We can talk about it all you want, but that was the cleanest and quickest way to bring us to a place where we just don't do that anymore. It takes out one bulleted item and two sub-things, both which talk about asymptomatic, and then removes the community notification of positive cases from the district dashboard, which at the last discussion we had indicated is functionally meaningless because they're not actionable through the community. They're dumps from whenever. So that's my explanation, and I'll shut up.
Mr. Tate with a comment, sir.
Well, I object to the term functionally meaningless, and I'm surprised that we haven't seen the motion until this moment. If there was going to be a board motion on the health and safety plan, shouldn't it have been on the agenda?
It's a conversation on.
The health and safety plan is on the agenda. My view of the motion is that it addresses an issue that is in the health and safety plan. Board members may have differing views as to whether this is the appropriate time to vote on the topics that Dr. Thorwart has addressed in his motion, but it is not illegal for the board to do so, in my opinion, because the health and safety plan is on the agenda. The board and the public has fair notice that it is an item for consideration by the board. I think it can go ahead and vote on the motion or not vote on the motion. So from the legal side, the board can proceed or not proceed with Dr. Thorwart's items. Whether it's a good idea for it to do so is the board's business.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply that it was in any way illegal. I'm just talking about board process and courtesy, that typically a motion would appear on the agenda so that the community could see the motion, so that the board could see the motion and consider it. And certainly I understand that a motion could be introduced at any time. I'm just disappointed in the process.
Anybody else? Mrs. Pally?
So I feel the same way. This is the first time I hear about that. And also, the way it was presented, I mean, I haven't memorized the health and safety plan, so it's not even like a presentation where it outlines the points that you want to have removed. So I mean, I think if you want to have a discussion, you have to go point by point, explain why you want to do that, and then it would be nice to have advance notice so we have more time to think about that, and maybe the public we want to come and make a comment. But I am also surprised that this is happening right now.
Anybody else? Mrs. Marceau?
I mean, I guess for me, we spent however many hours in the last meeting going through line by line. And if the board would like to pull this particular page up and do the same, I'm more than happy to. It's 8 o'clock, which is kind of early for us. So I'm more than happy to do that, or to talk about this further. I believe that the language that Dr. Thorwart talked about is a clarification to this area, and that when we were going through this, this should have been discussed more, but because we spent so much time on the document before, I think it was an oversight, honestly. So for me personally, I'm fine with voting on this evening. I'm happy to entertain whatever process makes people happy, but in my eyes, this isn't really something that's new. I think this really should have been addressed before, but we just spent a large amount of time going through every single bullet. And so I'm happy to entertain ideas on how to have this discussion, but that's just where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Marceau. I think Mrs. McKee, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salmon. I would disagree with striking this language. Dr. Thorwart, you said the term asymptomatic individuals means healthy. I beg to differ. One may be exposed, one may have COVID and be asymptomatic. For those individuals living with a household member and being exposed to someone in their household with COVID, and then attending school without even a mask, to me, endangers more lives. I prefer to keep this language.
As written? Okay, just so I'm clear. Anybody else? Mr. Dago, please.
Well, the easy one is the dashboard. I never really thought the dashboard gave us much really help, in the everyday life. And to me, it seemed more like it just made people upset. And I did ask if how the other school districts were reporting and whether or not we were comparing apples to apples would be important. But at this point, I don't think I've heard, much research results on that. I guess my question would be to Dr. Lambert. This takes care of part of it. I think you kind of hinted to the fact that we're talking about two different issues when we have people emailing. We have a problem in the lunchrooms and eating, and then we have another problem that I spoke about, which was, asymptomatic people at home exposure. So this takes care of the home exposure part. So I guess as we go forward, I'm going to try and get assurance from you that what you've seen that is a concern to members that are exposed or being treated in a certain way according to the health and safety plan, that's going to be resolved,
The question that had come to me previously was, why in one situation is it required and in the other situation is it recommended? The reason and my answer to that question, the rationale as to why we had in the plan the requirement for masks for someone who has ongoing household exposure was the guidance that we had. And I understand that it's for asymptomatic individuals, but from what my understanding is, and I'm not a doctor, but from what I've read and understood from the guidance, the person's most contagious time is the 48 hours before they become sick. So the reason for the masks was to avoid someone who could potentially get sick being in school when they were most contagious. So all I can say is the question is why required and why recommended. That was the difference between the two when that was the rationale for that at the time.
Thank you. So that addresses E, the section of E, the second bullet. What about in the lunchroom? That seems to be a different situation.
So for the lunchroom, we were talking about section B. When we talked about section B, we talked about, it was discussed at the last board meeting about whether we would do away with the section that had alternate eating spaces. I had shared at the time that my concern with that is that we have families that are not comfortable with not masking, and but the response to that could be, well, they have the option of wearing a mask, which they do. The concern that I shared with the board at the time is that in the cafeteria, they can't wear their mask. And I thought it was what my comment was, I would like to be able to afford those families that same level of comfort by having allowing them to eat distanced. So that is why when a student is with an ongoing contact or returning from positive, they would eat separately, a distance, not necessarily separately, but distance, and that could look different in different buildings depending on how many kids are in the cafeteria at a given time. What we did correct is when we had the concerns that the parents were calling us, rightfully they were upset because their child was coming home and telling them this and they didn't know. So now when our people call the families, when we get notified of a positive case or a close contact, when our staff calls the family, we tell them at the time, your student will be eating separately, distanced. I shouldn't say separately, apologize for that. They will be eating distance. And I feel that probably has also given families some comfort. They're not surprised by that when their child comes home.
I would just say it's a very tough situation, it seems. You have concerned parents and students, if separated, who feel completely healthy, but could possibly be contagious. I don't know if we have the right answer. If we're continuing down that, maybe would we think of the people who are worried about being around and isolated, maybe they should isolate? I mean, you could look at it the other way. Not that I'm advocating that. I'm just trying to come up with, how do we make this so that we're not getting students upset? And if we strike what we're talking about striking, will that automatically go away?
I don't know how on a day-to-day basis that I can't say to a student, this other student is an ongoing contact, so if you feel better, you could go eat someplace else. I can't share that information about the other student with students.
But when you isolate them, it's pretty much just putting a badge on them anyway. So I'm just going to leave it. I don't think it's an easy solution for you.
Dr. Lambert, do we have areas where kids who don't want to eat in the maybe Dr. Sanko, that don't eat in the cafeteria because of they just don't feel comfortable in the cafeteria because of the situation? Do we offer that area for those kids? So I'll let you answer that, and Mike, I guess my follow-up would be, so there could be kids that are sitting alone throughout the course of a day, if that's a...
There could be. It's not our practice for any child to eat alone, but outside of anything...
Separated more than others, I should say, or in another area, if you will.
And outside of anything to do with COVID, we have opportunities for kids to eat in alternate locations in buildings just based on some wants and needs.
Mr. O'Dago.
I'm just brainstorming as I'm thinking, but maybe we could have a table and it would be open to anybody that wanted to sit there, but we would ask that's where those people would sit.
Essentially, that's what we do, particularly at the secondary level. At the elementary level, some of our buildings in the cafeteria, they sit by homerooms, by classes, but not an assigned seat, but an assigned section.
Okay. Do you have a question? Anybody else? Mr. Tate?
Yeah, can we hear the motion again, please? Because
I was just actually going to do that. with you.
yeah, good, thank you.
You want it, so Mr. Tate asked if Dr. Thorwer could read the motion. Would you like to hear that before your question? Okay, good. Good.
So this is about the dashboard, and so if we pretend COVID doesn't exist, it does not go away. And I don't know if you know, but before I got into business, I studied mathematics and statistics. So I am in favor of data, I'm in favor of information, and in this case, you gain nothing by getting rid of information about the status of what is happening. So I would also use it as an indicator when it's time to move to the next stage and assume that, you know, the flu-like model, which I understand you can't wait to assume anyway. But I really see, I mean, there is so much information out there about how the disease is doing, not this disease, any disease. It's information about, is it a peak, is it coming down, how it's affecting the community, and this is, in our own little universe, this is the exact same information in our schools. I have no idea why would anyone want to take this away and what you would gain from that. I am just like totally surprised.
Okay. Anybody else? All right.
I can add a question.
Get a question.
Dr. Lambert, Dr. Elliott, and Dr. Sanko, does the county provide information from hospitals and from their own information as far as what the status of COVID is regarding spread and that sort of information?
I'm not exactly sure what information you're talking about, but I don't see any information along those lines from the county.
Regarding spread or infectious rates, number of cases, the county doesn't maintain anything
I mean,
like that?
they have information that tells us what the level of transmission is, whether it's high, moderate, I forget what the different categories are. So you can go onto their website, if that's meaning, and look at your town to see what color it is, and that will then tell you what the level of transmission is at the time.
But are you aware of a reason that they don't dial down further? The way perhaps our dashboard may or may not?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Does anybody else have an idea on why the county information doesn't drill down to a more aggregate number or a specific number other than risk and spread level? Are we aware of how Pennsbury conducts their dashboard? Because I know that we're compared often to Pennsbury. What data how do they come up or arrive at their specific number and data?
I can't answer that. I know that Dr. Black, who does the dashboard, has looked into that. I know that, like, for example, Central Bucks, I think they have a description on their website as to how that's done. I haven't looked at Pennsbury's personally.
And last time I think we spoke about this, you had indicated that the dashboard could show whatever information or convey whatever message we wanted. And if it wasn't doing the right, that we had to let you know what message that was. If that wasn't your state, I'm paraphrasing, if that wasn't the message, please correct.
What I was trying to say at the time, I think, is that what we put on the dashboard is the number of cases that are reported to us on a given day or the week aggregate of positive cases. That's what we put on there now. If you wanted us to break that down some other way, we could certainly try to do that. The concern that I was raising at the time is with data, once you start manipulating it, you start to make some errors. So if you want me to put on the dashboard the date that the person may have been contagious in school, I can try to do that. When I do those calculations, I might make some mistakes, and that makes me nervous with data, but we could certainly try to do that. And I think the reason I was saying that, I think to Dr. Thorwart's point, is that if you're looking at the dashboard now, the way we're presenting it, as a parent to say, is this should I be sending my kid to school or not? It's probably not going to tell you that, because it's not telling you when people were necessarily contagious in school. Because we could get that report of a kid being positive a week later.
And that kid could have picked up this anywhere else in the community. It's not reflective accurately of them, how contagious or how dangerous the school is. And that would be conveyed by the county information, by looking at the transmissibility rate, wouldn't it?
We would never know where someone would have picked up COVID. I know that when we ask our staff to report, we ask, do you think it was in school? But that's just what they think. We can't be sure where someone picked it up, if that's answering your question.
That helps a lot, and I think that it also sheds a little light on, I don't believe the intent of this school district, this administration, or this board is to convey concern and fear. And I also don't think that it's the intent of this board, this administration, this school district, to also close a blind eye. So if the dashboard is not providing usable data, if the county is doing a better job at that, I understand to some degree what we're doing here. But if the dashboard can do something without, as you put it, errors, that, I don't know, maybe then that's something that we could look at. But it doesn't seem like we're able to provide the information in an accurate manner. I don't know if I'm wrong or not, but let me know.
I don't know. If I try to think back to a long time ago when we started the dashboard, I thought there was questions from community wanting to know how many cases we have, and that was the question we were trying to answer at that point in time. I think there were questions that came up along the way of, can you do it this way or can you do it that way? And we looked at it each time, and this is where we've landed at this point in time. So it's just providing exactly what I said it was. When a case is reported to us, we put it on the dashboard. So in what it's telling people is, in general terms, this is how many positive cases there were last week.
I think for me, we've talked about this at length. I don't think you change the mechanism in which you're collecting, because it's completely going to blow the data across the board. But during the height of this, when you had 398 in a week, we were getting bombed with emails, the administration, how much longer are you going to keep schools open? It's got to be bad. It's got to be bad. It's got to be bad. And Dr. Elliott, I'm not going to hold you to it, but we haven't closed a classroom in weeks, months. This week we're showing 102 people that attend Council Rock that may be or is positive with COVID. That's the only thing this dashboard's telling us right now. It doesn't tell you how many kids are home, how many cameras are activated in the classroom. The question, I think, and to Dr. Thorwart's motion, is this, and we have not received an email either in weeks since we had the last conversation. So I think for me, my perspective would be, is there any value to keep doing this? One, is there man hours, people hours going into this that could be put somewhere else? Two, and three, what exactly are we looking to get out of it, which is, I think, Dr. Lambert's question recently and always. So to Mrs. Palley's point, I love data too. But data for me is actionable. Is there an actionable thing to this? And that's where I keep struggling. So that's kind of where I sit on this. I love hearing the conversation. Mr. Hickey, please.
Yeah, someone mentioned it before about just the term, the asymptomatic person. just the term itself kind of gives the implication that the person has COVID, which is very misleading. I mean, like you said, you could put, if you take their word to healthy individuals, you know, it makes no sense in here. An asymptomatic person, like I said, is not necessarily a person. An asymptomatic person with COVID is different than a healthy person. But this term in this context just assumes that these household members are asymptomatic with COVID walking around, and that's not necessarily true. So I really don't like the two bullets that sit there, or at least the terminology that's in it.
So let me just be the devil's advocate. What would you like to say then? I mean, because we do have a motion on the floor, so we're still in conversation.
Strike the two bullets.
Mike, what is your motion again, just for the record, at this point?
You want me to read it, or you want me to just tell you? I'll do both.
Why don't we read it so Mr. Cox can be all ears on this, and everybody in our colleagues as well.
My motion caused what I wanted, which was discussion. I mean, we can drop it if you want. I move to strike the third bulleted point of Section E of the Health and Safety Plan, which, by the way, is all in your agendas. You can download it. And all sub-bullets. And I further move to remove the COVID dashboard from the CR website, which means striking this section from the second bulleted item of Section E. So they're in two different bulleted items, number 2 and number 3.
Mrs. Pelly.
So going back to the dashboard, human nature, we love information. We want to know what is happening. I mean, you see like people together somewhere, you all immediately want to know what are they doing, what is happening. So yes, the state, the country, the countries, the whole world is tracking cases. But we want to know what is happening in our community. And in our community it's not only where we live, it's also our school district. So we want to know what's happening in our school district, and we're going to be relieved when we see that the cases are coming down, because they are. So I don't see that as creating fear at this point. I see it as creating relief, because tracking the cases that are coming down makes people feel more comfortable. And then from talking to parents, they don't decide to send their kids to school or not based on the dashboard. It depends on their exposure and the letters they receive from, like if there are positive cases, if somebody has 4 positive cases in their classroom, a parent may decide to, get their child testing and keep them at home and so on. So there's no argument that could convince me that it's anything good is coming out from having information about what's happening in our community.
Okay. Anybody else?
If I may.
Dr. Thornton.
Yeah, I added that to this motion this afternoon when I wrote it, basically because we came back from Christmas break with, 300 cases on day one of coming back into school. And that happened over Christmas break. That didn't happen in school on that first day. But we got beat up hard, and the fear was high because there were 300 cases walking around in our schools the first day after Christmas break. We got the email. So when I say it's not actionable, it's not. I mean, Dr. Lambert, if you guys need this data for something, that's fine. But then we need very firm words that, this is the dump from whatever we scraped today. You see it in the county data too. You'll notice a couple weeks ago, a large spike of cases in the county data. That was a lab dump. That wasn't a large spike of COVID cases. That was a lab dump. That they didn't get around to dumping them until that day, and it was 3 times as high as it normally would be. That's an artifact. That's not data, that's an artifact. I watch in New Jersey where 3,000 cases are reported in the state, and half of them happened last year. They're just getting around to recording them today. So I don't know the value of this data. I sincerely don't. I don't see any value in the data, but except to Mr. Roosevelt's point, strike fear in the hearts of many. So that's where I stand. So if I could act on it, if I knew that whatever you reported today happened today in schools, that would be a different number, but we don't. So, and it's not your fault, Dr. Lambert. It is not your fault.
I just wanted to be clear, and I appreciate your saying that has never been our intention to strike fear in anyone's heart. And as I said at the last meeting, we will continue to collect the data. It's just a matter of what you want to communicate to the public. That's up to you to decide. We get plenty of angry emails that we've created data that's not accurate for a variety of reasons. So I understand the angry emails that you get, because we get emails that would say, you didn't report enough information here because I know of all these other cases. So I understand your point, and I hope that the dashboard is clear that what we're reporting is the number of cases that were reported to us on a given day, and that's what we're reporting. And if it has caused fear, that was not our intent.
Understood. And I'm reluctant to ask you to do more work, because I really, really want this board to get back to talking about educating kids, actually about educating kids, not tracking COVID, not diverting resources to it. And last question, and I'll stop. No one's given us any money to collect this data at all. We have gotten no funding to collect this data whatsoever, have we? I'm looking at my administration all around. I didn't think so. Thank you.
I apologize, sorry. Mrs. Marceau.
That's a good segue into my question. Dr. Lambert, do you have any idea how much time it takes each week, or just like to quantify staff time of how much time this dashboard takes from the person who's collecting the information to someone who's doing the update on the website, if you were just ballparking it?
It's not a lot of time, because the data is coming to us. We have people who are getting the information. We hired 2 staff members one who handles gathering the data from students, one who handles gathering data from families. Those 2 people spend all of their time gathering that data. Dr. Black, who updates the dashboard, to her is just coming in and putting the numbers into the dashboard, because, like I said, if she would tell you that she could probably put down on the dashboard when people were contagious. I don't think we could do that with great accuracy, and I'm not sure it would be helpful, because if it comes on a Monday and it was on a Saturday and that kind of thing. So the actual dashboard itself is not a ton of time, because the data's coming to us.
Thank you. And so we have 2 employees full-time. So like generally 40 hours each.
I'm going to look to Mrs. Taylor. I believe that they are hourly employees that are doing the dashboards. I know that there are times when they probably work a much longer day than other days, depending on when, for example, on Mondays are always busier days, because we're catching up with all the weekends.
But they're just committed to.
There are 2 clerical staff whose sole job is to contact families to get the information here.
And so if we removed the dashboard, would they still be contacting families and helping in other ways, or would that free them up to do other work within Council Rock?
Yeah, they would. We get a lot of phone calls. We get people call. People are very upset. People they need to talk. They have a lot of questions, and they spend a lot of time helping people, answering questions, telling them what to do. And in that process, they're getting the data. These people were not employed. They were not taken from another job. They were hired for this purpose.
Thank you very much.
And they're nurses, correct, Christine? Just push the button.
One is an RN, the other is a clerical.
So who do the parents call? Do they have a direct number that the parents call for a triage of this? Or are they working their way through the school, and the school goes to those nurses?
I'll let Dr. Lambert speak to the student side, but on our staff side, for staff positivity, we have a Google form that staff know to fill out, and then Elisa Picaro, who is our clerical person, contacts them upon receipt.
And on the student side, I'm 90% sure the information comes into the school nurse and then gets disseminated to the other individual.
And just to jump in and support Dr. Lambert, if the dashboard comes down, the data would still have to be collected and the work would still have to be done, correct?
I don't know that I would say it has to be done. No one's asking us for that data. It's just we've been collecting the data. I would like to see the data. If you said to me, don't collect the data, school's going to go on tomorrow if we're not collecting the data.
So just to clarify, if we would not collect this data, particularly related to our students, we would have no way of knowing whether or not those students would be eligible for one-way viewing. So right now, that data that we collect informs us which students are able to participate in the one-way viewing that we just started this week. Is that correct, Dr. Lambert?
That is correct.
Dr. Lambert, can I just mention one thing? And I think you mentioned this at the January meeting, or maybe it was the meeting before. But and it may be that the Bucks County Department of Health no longer is interested in receiving the information. But over the summer, there was a requirement that came from the state requiring the school district to report positive cases to the local Department of Health. And that requirement has not fallen away, although I think it has in practice, perhaps.
There's a requirement from the Department of Education that we are to notify our Department of Health of positive cases, which we do. That has not fallen away.
And in order to notify it, you have to collect the data.
I believe in the plan, it's still, I'd have to find it. It was always here that families are to notify us of positive cases. They notify the nurse, and then the nurse notifies us, and then we report the data.
Mr. Cox, are you done with your thoughts, or are you still digging in?
I am for now.
Mr. Dago, please.
Yes, I wanted to just make a comment to Dr. Elliott's concern about not being able to report or qualify people for live streaming. The dashboard is more of a consolidation of the data. The data will still be reported in the health and safety plan to the nurse. According to that, students and employees should still report their positive cases. So they're still going to be collecting the data. That doesn't mean you have to consolidate the data and present large numbers on a weekly or daily basis. So we're not getting rid of the mechanism you need to qualify people for live streaming. We're leaving that in section bullet 2E, bullet 2. We're only getting rid of the second bullet in that's second bullet, should I say, sub-bullet.
Yes. I understand that, and I only said that because as I'm tracking this conversation, I thought I saw that a board member suggested, why are we even collecting this? So I wanted to just clarify, there's a reason why, for our purposes right now, that when it comes to this one particular thing with one-way viewing, we do need to know who those students are.
And I was making the point that what the state's requiring us to do and what we're doing is completely and utterly unfunded. We were just told to do it, find the resources to do it ourselves. So.
Is there anybody else?
And just, there's a lot that happens in that process. It's also when we're notified of the positive case, the family wants to know, when can my child return to school? So that all of those questions that have to be answered are part of that whole data collection process. So when I say that we don't have to collect the data, what I'm saying is school will happen whether we're collecting the data or not, but there are reasons to have the data. We have to report the data to the Department of Health, and there's information that our families are looking at
looking to us to provide them, and in so doing, we're collecting the data.
And in turn, it goes on the dashboard. Is that correct? And in turn, it goes on the dashboard from there?
Correct.
Okay. But Dr. Elliott, there's 102 cases this week. Do you know off the top of your head how many active cameras we have in classrooms?
I do not.
Is it close to 102?
I do not know because I don't know what classrooms all those students are in to know how many.
Yes, so in other words, you could have 2 kids out in a classroom, which could be 2 of that kids from Newtown or whatever. Okay, just for clarification. Thank you. Mr. Roosevelt.
Yeah, I just want to address one thing. 2 employees which we've hired, which sounds like they're doing full-time work to collect this information, I don't think is a small amount of time. Maybe it might be in comparison to the entire district. It sounds like these employees are needed, especially if the result of their work is to alleviate concern and give parents their answers. But 2 full-time employees working a lot on phone work and with data, to me, I don't know if anybody disagrees, sounds like a considerable amount of time. Or, you know, I don't think we should marginalize their efforts and what they're doing. I don't think that that's.
Again, if that's what I didn't, that wasn't my intent. What I was saying, I agree with you, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of overtime sometimes. Actually putting the numbers onto the dashboard is not a lot of time.
Yeah, I didn't mean to disparage you in that intent. I realize that.
Dr. Elliott?
Sure. Ms. Valley.
I came into this kind of late, but I was under the impression that the state has provided substantial funding for COVID relief. I know in many different ways, but I assume some of it comes to the school budget. Is it correct? Or maybe Mr. Harris?
Ms. Polly, I think that what you're referring to is the ESSER funding that we've received, several ESSER grants over the past several years. So there are 4 iterations of that grant funding. The first one has already been expended. That grant expired in September of this past year, September 2021. We currently are working with the funding of ESSER 2, ARP ESSER, and then there was an additional set-aside related to ARP ESSER. As a district, we developed a plan as required by the grants with respect to how we were using those funds. In some cases, there were specific guidelines for certain percentages of those funds that needed to be spent on certain things. And so we needed to make sure we met those requirements. But we looked at at the time of receiving those grant fundings, we looked at what our needs were and made some decisions about how to spend those funds. So they are, some of them, the majority are being spent for continuing our technology integration specialists. And then we have other portions of those funds being used for our summer academy in the summer, as well as for some other opportunities to support learning loss in our students in school. So they've all been appropriated in particular ways based on how the grant guidelines were given to us.
I concur.
Anybody else?
Just briefly, I will say that I think it's a big mistake to get rid of the dashboard. And I could go on for half an hour as to my thoughts. But I'm comforted by the fact that Dr. Lambert says we are still going to be collecting the data. So while we won't be reporting it publicly, our staff, our administrative team will still have the data, which is the important thing, really. So I'm less concerned about doing away with the dashboard after hearing that. So thank you, Dr. Lambert.
Okay. Dr. Thorwood, I would just ask, do you want to separate the motion to 2 separate votes, or are we, I think we're all in the same place with?
I am happy to do whatever you would like.
I'm just trying to get a consensus around the room, I think. I think Mr. Tate was basically a flat-out no on the dashboard, but he's relieved. But I don't know if he'd vote for it or again. I mean, obviously he'd vote against it. But I mean, I just want to give the board the opportunity. If your thoughts are, I'm okay with the one, not the other. Maybe we separate it just to be clean. If there's any comment to that question, please, Mrs. Marcel.
I just had a question for Mr. Cox. So will we be voting on Dr. Thorward's motion and then voting again on the plan itself? Are we 2 votes or 1?
Just one, well, just one vote unless there's an additional motion with respect to the plan. But I understood Dr. Thorwart's motion to address 3E, the third bullet point, and 3E, the second bullet point containing the second sub-bullet point. So that would amend the health and safety plan if that passes, and maybe there is a reason to break those 2 up, as Mr. Solomon mentioned.
Well, I would ask in the same vein with you, and this is where I struggle with this. There's part of this document I think some people sort of like, really like, and don't like. At the end of this, we have to do a roll call on the document itself, is my understanding. So the motion would either remove or keep the items that you mentioned, and then my sense is we should still revote the plan as it sits after Dr. Thorward. Because I can make whatever I want in there, and if I don't, then I can still vote against the plan. Is that correct?
Can somebody read the exact sentences that you want to remove instead of say bullet blah blah blah? So just so I know exactly what they are.
I thought it was very clear, but I will, the third bullet of section E says the CRSD will work in consultation with the Bucks County Health Department to identify close contacts of positive cases. Asymptomatic individuals with a non-ongoing exposure to COVID-19 may continue in school normally unless symptoms develop. So far, so good. Asymptomatic individuals with an ongoing household exposure to COVID-19 must wear a mask for a minimum of 1 week from the symptom onset of the household member without exception. In households with multiple positives, the mask wearing period may be extended. So that's the strikeout in its entirety. As we pointed out earlier, the Bucks County Health Department doesn't seem to care about close contacts anymore, period. So striking the whole thing seemed to be the cleanest way forward.
I thought that the Bucks County Health Department wants to know the positive cases, correct? Dr. Lambert or
These are close contacts.
Yeah, but you have to know the cases to know if you're a contact, right?
Let me just be clear about one thing. And I may have stolen Dr. Lambert's thunder. There remains a requirement that the district report positive cases of COVID-19 to the local Department of Health for case investigation, contact tracing, and issuance of quarantine and/or isolation orders, and exclude school children and staff from having contact with other school children or staff showing symptoms of a communicable disease. I just want to be clear, those 2 things remain requirements for the school district to comply with.
Ms. Pelly, are you good? I'll give you a minute. So
I thought there was more language that you wanted to take out, right?
And the dashboard, which is the one right above it that says community notifications of positive cases will be provided via district-wide dashboard. The dashboard's only in the health and safety plan in one place, about 4 inches or 3 inches up from that section, right above it.
Dr. Thorward, I was having a sidebar with Mr. Salomon while you were clarifying your motion. I apologize, but I was being pulled in a couple different directions. Am I correct that your motion applies to 3E echo, the third bullet point in its entirety, including the 2 sub-bullets, and the second bullet point only as to the second sub-bullet point in 3E?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Salomon's suggestion is that your motion be clear that all the other provisions of the health and safety plan are remaining in effect as they are currently written.
That was my intent. Well, my intent was to cause a discussion on this, and I certainly achieved it. Mr. Cox, I will give you this, and then you'll have it.
I'm good, I'm clear, Dr. Thorward. I think your other 8 colleagues are clear as well.
Multitasking at best here. So the motion is, as Dr. Thorward stated, the motion will be voted on and everything else in the plan stays as already in there, just to be clear. Any other questions? Madam Secretary, give me a roll call, please, then.
Ed Solomon,
Yes.
Bob Hickey,
Yes.
Joe Hidalgo,
Yes.
Krista Marcel,
Yes.
Marion McKee,
No.
Yoda Pally,
Absolutely not.
Michael Roosevelt,
Yes.
Ed Tate,
No.
and Michael Thorward.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-3, correct? Mr. Hidalgo, you have a comment?
Just want to make sure we're not jumping off health and safety just yet, because we mentioned, I wanted to address at least, make clarification, so I'm good, and we have an open discussion about what's going on in the cafeterias. And if there's, did we already clear that up? But is there anything in this health and safety plan, is that your discretion, at 3 feet when possible? But now, how are we, now that we've just changed this language, are we still going to be identifying close contacts? Is that direct, or should I say, yeah, close contacts, whatever, the asymptomatic home exposures? That language is gone, so how are we going to address situations in the, when they're not masked eating? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I gotta
Basically, we have
be
an
honest,
issue-
Joe, I don't.
Okay, so we have an issue in the situation in the cafeterias and during snack where children are being isolated, right? And I'm not sure whether that's was addressed and how we're going to go, if this changes that policy or where that policy is in the health and safety plan. I think you went and spoke about B, section B, if that's correct. And I'm just trying to, like, is it in the health and safety? Is it in the health and safety plan, or is it just policies that we're coming up with?
What, with the vote that just occurred, we're not going to, if they're a close contact, there's no impact. They come to school, they don't have to wear a mask when they're in school. We had talked previously about in the cafeteria when other students who may feel uncomfortable with that, or families who feel uncomfortable with that, they could wear a mask as at least some level of mitigation for their discomfort. Now, when they eat, everyone will not have a mask. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. That would be a decision that would need to be made as to whether you want us to maintain distancing when students are eating for that reason.
So during eating, the plan currently states 3 feet minimum distancing when feasible, if it says it. I just don't see how there's any language in there where we're taking a close contact and treating them differently now. And so I think we're good. We'll just see how it plays out, I guess, unless we need some understanding, if there's some misunderstanding between the board and what you guys are doing. If that's gone, then that's good, you know? For the people who are complaining, maybe for the people who were worried,
I need
it
to
really
know that,
maybe-
am I giving directions to our buildings that when they have close contacts, they are not telling them to eat at a distance, which, depending on the building, could look differently.
Thank you.
Currently, if they are, when we are aware of close contacts, we ensure that there is distancing when eating.
If I may, distancing for who?
As it stands now, it would have been the individuals that were, could be the individual who was a close contact or was returning as a positive in days 5 to 10.
Okay. I don't have any problem with those that are concerned isolating themselves. If you want to maintain tables for, and maybe I'm going too far here, but this is, you know, at this point, personal decisions, not mandates, not, you know, rules. And so if you want to, if your schools can handle tables for the fearful or concerned or whatever, then, you know, by all means, I think we should address that much like you would do for any other individual circumstances. Or am I off base? Mr. Salomon, you're looking funny.
No, I'm not. I just think that this is at the building level where they can address those needs as other districts have areas for people that feel uncomfortable or may need to be separated, and that's their choice. So that works in other districts, and I'm sure our building principals are doing whatever they can to make as many kids comfortable as we want them in school.
And I don't want to put Dr. Sanko on the spot, but I'm going to. In the fall, prior to elementary students being vaccinated, we made sure that buildings had areas where kids could go eat separately. And I know there was a struggle there. And so I don't know, I don't want to be the one that says that, yes, they can do that again. I don't know if they can or cannot.
Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Lambert. So at all of our buildings, we have spaces where there is spacing provided. So we operate our cafeterias like we did pre-COVID. And then in our schools, there are sections where kids could be spaced out if they so choose, or up until this point, when there was an in-home contact and they were returning to school for those 5 days. So that's how it's functioning right now. When prior to this, before students had an opportunity to be vaccinated, we really had a difficult time with the spacing that Dr. Lambert just spoke about a moment ago.
Before you leave there, Dr. Sanko, one last thing. We no longer have any students that can't be vaccinated if they choose to, correct? That the age limit has dropped to the point. And that's been such that at this point, there's been more than enough time for both series of those vaccinations, right?
That's correct. I was trying to remember I think by the end of December, I don't remember the date was, but it's passed.
Just don't know if they have a time to do boosters and if the boosters have been approved for that age group.
None of those youngsters would have had their second dose long enough ago to be eligible for boosters at this point.
I think it's 12 plus, right? To have a booster because it goes for 12. But they're all 12 years old in 6th grade, if I understand correctly. So I don't know if if they all had time to get boosted.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Anybody else? All right, hearing none, we're going to go to letter B in items for discussion. Dr. Elliott, possible action on 520.1, please.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. So this is an item that we've shifted in a couple meetings just for the sake of time, and just to kind of quickly highlight some pieces related to this. So I want to first clarify there's a distinction and the difference between Section 520 plan and also the flexible instructional day that we also have as a district that was approved by the state. So the flexible instructional day for those newer board members was established with this passing of Act 64 of the PA Public School Code. And what FID, Flexible Instructional Day, or FID, gives for districts is gives them the option to deliver instruction in a manner other than customary, basically in a virtual manner, when in-person is not possible due to reasons such as weather, perhaps a law enforcement emergency that requires us to close schools temporarily, or other temporary circumstances. The FID is used for the entire district and when not when just one building would need to close. As per the Act 64, each district is only allowed 5 FID days annually, and that's it. You're limited to 5, no more than 5. And applications are approved by the state. Our application was approved, and we have our approved FID for the 2021-22 school year and the 2022-23 school year. So after next year, we would need to submit an application again to the state for FID. In contrast, Section 520 is also part of this public school code, but Pennsylvania, early on in the pandemic, identified COVID-19 as a global pandemic as an emergency under Section 520 of the public school code. And Section 520 gives districts the ability to utilize temporary provisions, in this case virtual, to meet the required number of 180 school days. So those temporary provisions must be approved by the Department of Education, which we submitted a template and it was approved. Those provisions can only be enacted for pandemic-related issues in this case. So we could not use the 520 plan for a weather-related closure. We can use our FID for a weather-related closure. So we can only use 520 for something related to the pandemic, as the Department of Education has established. Recently, Pennsylvania Department of Ed announced that they will consider, again, in the 2022-2023 school year, that COVID-19 pandemic is still an emergency, and as such, districts will be able to, again, submit an application or a template of schedules or alternate provisions, virtual schedules, that they could enact and use if they need them. And we cannot use the submission that we did for this year for next year. It's very clear. The template is for 1 year only. And so if we choose to submit a submission again, we'll have to do a new one. We cannot do that until after July 1st, 2022. So we have a lot of time before that decision would have to be made. If we do not select to submit a 520 plan again for the 2022-23 school year, the only option we have if there would be a reason that we would need to close or go, say, use virtual or use an alternative provision, is our FID. And we are, again, limited to 5 days with that. So it's my recommendation, and this is not something that the board obviously needs to decide or tonight, because we have many months before we would need to submit a plan. But I thought it was fitting, since this was a discussion item and this just came recently about the addition for next year, that at this time my recommendation would be that we continue to move forward with submitting a plan to have it in our back pocket just in case. I, like everyone sitting here, want our kids in school. We want them to be in person. We know that that's how they learn best. And I hope that the situation continues to evolve in such a way that we don't even have to consider this as a possibility. But I also know that this pandemic has been nothing but evolving and always changing, and we need to be responsive. So I think that it would be good for us to at least have it if we need it, but hopefully we don't have to use it. And if there are any questions about FID or 520, I'm happy to answer those.
Yeah, specific to the new board members, it's a lot. Any questions for Dr. Elliott? Anybody from the board at this point? Mr. Dago?
Yeah, I think this is a repeat from last meeting. When I mentioned this before, I think you guys were telling me that this was the 5-day weather, the FID. I could have been wrong, but I thought that was kind of what you guys stopped me in the middle of my inquiry, because what I'm trying.
I thought it was.
Right. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to recall, because we go through so many things when we're on this board, and you go through so much information, things get lost. But I do remember me wanting to bring it back to the meeting for discussion, because my impression is when we did this, and if you wanted to pull it up, there is that 100% virtual model that is available. Obviously, we want the traditional, and I wouldn't even touch hybrid, to be honest with you. But if somebody wants to basically attend school virtually, we passed a mechanism for them to do that on an individual basis or a class basis, I thought. Now, you're shaking your head no, but I'm just going to read up at the top where it says you can, in this document that we passed, you can provide on the individual or classroom level. I thought that we could use this to not mark somebody absent, but actually have them counted towards, if you look at it. Let me see if I can find it. Go ahead.
I was going to ask if you could point me specifically to where you're reading.
Okay, so the document's in there, but let me just see exactly in which paragraph. Temporary visions, global pandemic, structural hours, level 3. Might be in the very end. It's in section B. Should the school need to use remote learning at either a student or school level, the LEA should submit a sample weekly schedule. So we submitted a sample weekly schedule, and it can be done at the student level. And I don't think we've done that with one student this year.
No, we've not done that with a single student.
Well, that's what I've been hoping we could have had at our fingertips. That's why I wanted to know that the cameras and the computers and everything was there. We spent all the money, and we don't even have to mark them absent. We had the tool right here that passed, not unanimously, but could have been a good, should say, a big bat to give us the authority to do it, and it was ignored. But not that I'm saying it's bad. Being in school is good, but we had the tool to use, and it could actually count towards 180 days for that student that's out. And I don't even think you have to be sick with COVID. You could be an exposure. I don't think we're qualifying who does that. So I just hope in the future I want to give people the options. We have the technology. Makes them feel comfortable. It's not ideal. And if we're doing one way, that'd be a good question whether one way would even qualify. But, there's a lot to digest and figure out, but I'm not sure we have a plan to implement individual remote learning. And you might even be asynchronous. I think it says you can be asynchronous and still count. So it's good that we're having the discussion, because we're going to be looking at the rest of this year and next year to get this technology up and running if deemed it's there. We already voted that we can use it if we want to. So I'm just going to stop there. Thanks.
So just to clarify, and Mr. Cox, if there's anything you feel to add here as well, Section 520.1 is only for pandemic-related issues. So we could not use it for any other case where a student might want to be virtual. This is only for things related to COVID-19. And while I see where it says in there about the schedule for a student or a school level, our template that we submitted to the state and how we would implement it is designed for a school or a classroom, as we had done prior to the winter break, we had times where certain classes, based on our health and safety plan and some of the information in our health and safety plan that is no longer part of it, where we would temporarily close a classroom for several days, and then that classroom would use a virtual option, which is part of what this plan was, and teachers were given additional guidance around that.
And I do see that, thank you, because it says well, it says attends each class, but again, the document itself says it could be individual or the whole class. And again, determining what's pandemic-related, where you draw the line. If somebody's fearful of getting COVID, then I don't know if that's considered pandemic-related. Is it in the document which says that is there a definition for what's pandemic-related? And I'll leave it to Mr. Cox, thank you.
I would just say that this 520.1 vote and document, all it does is it gives the board room to maneuver. It's a vote and a document that sits with PDE. And if the school board at some point determines that because of the pandemic, it needs to shift away from in-person learning, it has the ability to do that without having to file anything else with PDE and still meet its 900-hour requirement, and the state subsidy would not be in jeopardy as a result of that. Now, whether the board decides to shift course from what I understand to be a strong preference for in-person learning is up to the board. Right now, the only thing that I see in the health and safety plan that would ever have the board consider leveraging this 520.1 plan is the classroom closure provision, which the administration could invoke and close a classroom for 5 days. This document would enable the district to do that without jeopardizing, with respect to that classroom, the 900-hour requirement. Mr. Hidalgo, I think that you may want to make changes to the way the district is providing education in ways beyond what's in the health and safety plan. And if the board wants to do that, it could, and it could leverage this plan. But right now, as I read this document, the only thing in the health and safety plan that would implicate it would be if the district has to close a classroom for 5 days or whatever because of an outbreak. It would then have the ability to leverage this plan and report that it met its hour requirements for those students.
Understood. Just my point would be, I still didn't hear the answer of where the definition is of what's pandemic related. Is that up to us to draw the line?
It is, and it could be the example that I just mentioned, which is a classroom closure. It could also be that, I mean, if the board wanted to, it could offer, it could go, I don't think it wants to, but if it wanted to, it could go back to the hybrid programming that it had 2 years ago. That's the answer to that question.
Okay, and I already said that.
It might be because a family is worried about their children being exposed.
Well, and that could be considered pandemic related, but again, don't ignore the language that says student or school level. So we've already passed it. It is a possibility. That what's COVID related and what's not COVID related is the discretion of the board, and I think that hasn't been defined. And it's fine. Look, we hope that COVID goes away and this is not a problem anymore, so we won't have it. But
and what PDE is telegraphing is that it's basically up to each local school board to determine, in its view, reasonably, what COVID-related means.
So who determined what COVID-related is on this board or administration? And that's for everybody. Do we have a definition, or is it just who made the decision?
The board has, by virtue of its health and safety plan, and right now what it views as a COVID-related closure that would invoke these 520.1 provisions as the closure of a classroom.
So would it also be, it could entertain using this for individual coverage, to count them not absent, for example?
Probably.
I'll leave it at that. It's okay.
Look, at one point, it was up to families to decide what educational, how their children would receive an education.
Yeah, please. I understand what you want. I hope you heard what our superintendent said about doing that at the last board meeting, virtual learning. I hopefully you heard that. So this board member listened to the superintendent on that and will not be voting for any kind of mishmash of stuff in there. So that's just me.
Sure.
But you know, we have voted on a plan. If you have a plan that you want to throw out here to vote on,
Sure.
lay it out there.
Well, what I would do is ask the administration to develop how it would work. But I'll tell you this, can we use this to not mark somebody absent that is now COVID positive and we're given the one-way live streaming? Can we mark them as attended under this provision?
I think that's within the board's discretion.
I'm pretty much done, thanks.
Whether to do so that's purely board business.
Absolutely. We had a discussion, I appreciate it.
Okay, anybody else?
Good. You're done.
From here, we move to the second public comment. Gentlemen, sir, you're only one left. Thanks for hanging out with us. You have nothing still? Okay, great. From there, we're going to move to board comment. Any new business? And Ms. Pally, just wait for old business, just in case there's new. Anybody have new business? Old business, Ms. Pally, please.
So at the last facilities meeting, the custodial services company, ABM, came and made a presentation saying that they have trouble finding people to do the job, to clean our schools. The average pay is $13.20 per hour, and a lot of people can find jobs in, somewhere else that pay $15 to $18 per hour. So they asked if we could increase the rate to $15 per hour so they can have a chance to hire and maintain staff. I think, if I remember correctly, there are 7 positions that are open and they cannot fill them. And they said what they're doing, I think they're still doing a good job, but they are doing overtimes. They pay bonuses to people so they can stay and do the job. And they said they're losing money. They're losing money cleaning Cancer Rock schools. So I would like to, so I think we left it that we had some questions for them and they said they will come back and provide more information. So I don't know if they provided more information. Maybe the facilities people would tell us if they came back with more information. But I do want to say that I think this is something that requires our action, and we need to be proactive, not reactive. As you know, to be a good executive, you have to see what is coming down the road and take the right decisions, make the right decisions. So we should not wait until this escalates and becomes an issue. I believe that we need to act on that so that the schools are clean. And, you know, I don't think the schools are going to close down if we don't have the staff, but I'm sure that the after-school activities may have to be canceled, or some of the sports activities, because who's going to clean if these people are not there? Also, it's very likely they can walk away. So I think as a good business rule is to create relationships and be able to rely on your partners. So I urge, so one is my question, have we received any more information? And number two is to urge the board to act on this before it becomes a big issue for us.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Roosevelt.
I chaired that facilities meeting, so I'm happy to address this. The reason that this was not an agenda item for this week was not because there were members on this board that clearly indicated that they were for or against it. There were specific items that were asked of the two representatives that came, and I have not seen the answers to that. ABM did get a response back to us, but the response was effectively a repeat of the presentation. It did not address some of the specific concerns. We did not have 5 votes to advance it from committee to this meeting, and the result of that was largely due to us not having enough information to have 5 people to adequately feel positive about moving forward on that. I believed at the time that there were certain questions that the two gentlemen on behalf of their company felt uncomfortable discussing in public with respect to their competition. And perhaps that was part of the reason that they were going to get back to us, and that wasn't included. So it's nothing more than that. We didn't have 5 that had enough information to move it to here.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Roosevelt. Is there anybody else?
I'll just.
Mr. O'Dago.
Yeah, I'll just say the comment that I made was we've been talking about it for an hour. Let's just put it to, plan on putting it on the agenda and it can be tabled if necessary. That's really how so it probably would have just been on tonight. We just would have tabled it. That was just another cleaner way of doing it, the way we did it. We never said we were going to bring it to the agenda and we were going to vote on it or anything.
Anybody else? Anybody for anything at this point? Doug, are you
I
having?
received no information from them, although they knew that we're waiting for the information.
Mr. Taylor, can you comment to that?
I guess at this point, I'd like to know what other information you're looking for. I do believe that they answered the questions in the letter that they provided in follow-up to that meeting the next morning.
There was specific questions and concerns raised by myself, Mr. Hidalgo, and Mr. Salmon, and possibly also Dr. Thorwart that I didn't see addressed in their response. I saw effectively a repeat of what they presented. And I'm happy to address that offline, or we could do it here if it's that clear. I just want to review my notes and we could review the meeting and find those specific questions. I don't want to butcher it on any behalf of my other board colleagues, but I didn't see the spirit of those questions addressed.
Okay, if you could please email me that list of questions, I'll send them off to ABM. Thank you.
Anybody else? Dr. Thorwart?
Yeah, you can reach out to me too, because I pulled the original letter of commitment, and ABM's a conglomerate, so I have their 2021 fiscal fourth quarter earnings now and stuff. The delay allowed me to do some more research, so yes, please do.
And I believe, if I'm speaking out of line, please stop me. I believe we're going to discuss this again at facilities with possibly somebody else from ABM.
Yes, I put it on the 17th February Facilities Committee and invited ABM to attend that.
Okay. So I would line up additional questions for Doug through the email as request, or be ready for additional questions and answers at the meeting, I assume.
It'd be helpful if you could get those questions to me in advance. That way ABM hopefully will be ready to answer those at the meeting.
Well, right, yeah, and for me, Jason, I want a 5-year projection or whatever they're asking for, what it looks like in our budget, how we're paying for it, how it affects taxes, possible tax increase, what else is on the agenda coming down the line in terms of contracts that'll be renegotiated, those type of things. And I think, and I would ask if you could clear your schedule for the 17th and come and join us for that meeting as well.
I appreciate the invitation.
Anybody else? Mr. Tate.
Yeah, I'm glad Ms. Pally raised the issue. It is a serious concern that's not going to go away. And thank you, Mr. Taylor, for your efforts at working with ABM. I know that Doug has worked hard to foster a cooperative relationship with ABM, and they've been doing good work. We just have to figure out what economic conditions have, the problem created by economic conditions. We've got to find a solution. So I'm glad they're coming back on the 17th.
Yeah, and again, thanks for the conversation, bringing it up. Doug, I would just ask one follow-up question. Are we having any complaints from our building principals that the buildings are not being cleaned to Apple Level 2, or they're under or above, or are we having any complaints?
We're not having complaints, no.
Are you happy with the service that you're getting at this point?
I'm happy with the service, yes.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you, good evening.